This is the Mentor Moments podcast. My name is Brayton Wooters, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Michael Keener. On Mentor Moments, we take the time to interview counseling professionals and personal mentors. We hope you enjoy this episode and keep tuning in.
All right, we have another episode here for season 4 of Mentor Moments. I am so pleased and welcome to introduce my friend Mark Irvin. I met him last summer. He was the keynote speaker for the Missouri Rehab Association State Conference, and he was just so engaging and wonderful to be around. We thought he'd be a great guest to be on Mentor Moments. So Mark, thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, really, yeah.
So give our listeners a brief overview of your background and career.
Well, okay, sure. It spans back. I mean, can't you tell by these whiskers that I've been around the sun a couple times, right? So I just hit my 63rd birthday, August the 29th. So I'm feeling really good about that. Also, I'll tell you this early on that October 1 was my anniversary for my injury as becoming a paraplegic. And, I was on a call this morning and they were talking about, well, did you celebrate? I'm like, everything was going really, really, really well. And then I put my T in my wheelchair between my legs and I hit a bump and it fell over and it gave my toe a 3rd-degree burn. I'm like, I should have went to bed earlier, right? But my career, I span back into the construction and real estate development sector since 1986 is when I first started into this field. And we've built and I've worked with lots of developers. We've done home building, commercial finishing, tenant finishing, and I've done some working with University of Kansas with KU on their education program to whereas we instituted some school to work type programming over in South Africa. That was my highlight of the career thing for real. But real estate and development, that's been my space. It's what I'm most passionate about, along with community development, and that's where I'm at. And now my new speaking platform aspect came from me becoming a paraplegic and recognizing the people who had issues. So it's like, okay, my wife's like, so what next, Mark? I'm like, I got enough going on, back.
Well, I know I don't know you that well, but just from what I know, it sounds like you are a go-getter and an opportunist and always looking for the next, I guess, that next challenge, that next opportunity. So I hope our listeners really feel that from our time together today.
Well, I'll give it what I got.
I love it. I love it. So, obviously our podcast, the name is, Mentor Moments. We like to highlight, how integral having mentors is in our lives, both in career and outside of career. So how have mentors impacted your life, impacted your career, and how you've developed just kind of as a person?
Mentors have been amazing in my life. I'll tell you, I think I'm gonna go back to I'll just span back a few decades. That's all. I won't go all the way back to the beginning, right? But I've had mentors show me the way in some aspects of career focus. But I'm gonna have to also say that some of the old senior guys that were ahead of me, I asked them for a lot of advice in the construction and development world and space. And they used a lot of explicitives to tell me to go figure it out. And that wasn't the right way to go about it. But what I told those old guys is one day you're going to pass on and it'll be my generation running it anyway. But I'm glad that I didn't have to live with that bitter feeling as I move forward because I met some wonderful mentors that have given me a lot of guidance. One guy, his name's John Walker. He used to work for an organization here, whereas he had, I think, 50 managers under him, and their company did reinsurance, right? So he managed $350 million annual portfolio with these 50 managers. And I can remember one day I was at a retreat, whereas a nonprofit organization was going to bring me on board. And I'm sitting over, I got over there, I had on my big Stetson and my bolo and thinking I'm all need to be clean to the nine. And all these guys and gals over there in their shorts and no shave for a Saturday. It's a retreat. I didn't know about retreats and in the boardroom like that. So, you know, it was 1995 or so. And so I was talking to those guys, and they were having the boardroom and having a meeting. And the facilitator of the meeting, he was running the whiteboard, and they were talking about using kids for subcontractors in home renovation projects. And I was sharing with them, I was raising my hand inside the boardroom, right? And that wouldn't get me anything. So all of a sudden I said, hey, and they like looking all down the table at me like, who let this guy in here, right? And then my guy that brought me in, John Shore, he's with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. He said, oh, that's Mark Irvin. Hey, I told y'all he's a great guy. He's a great guy. They said, yes, Mark, what's on your mind? I said, you all are talking about taking these kids into the nonprofit organization and renovating apartment buildings and houses all over the city and making a job career opportunity out of it and turning these kids into subcontractors. And I'm like, you're signing in the red when you do that. I mean, I've been in the construction business since 86, you know, plus 20 years. And you all are signing up these kids. I'm like, that's going to be a negative. They said, okay, thank you, Mark. And they went right back to what they were doing. Like they didn't hear a word I said. So I didn't want to have no bad attitude and walk out. I mean, get, you know, like, and then storm out. So I gracefully walked out of the room, and all of a sudden I got this real hard slap on my shoulder. And it was a guy over here, and he hugged me up underneath his arm. And he told me, Marco, first time I ever been called Marco, Marco, you remind me of my senior vice president of sales and marketing. He's a nuts and bolts guy, just like you are. Now, inside that room, that's the philanthropic community in that room. And those guys and gals in there, they don't have to agree on everything. They just need to come to a consensus. And when they come to a consensus, that's when they bring the nuts and bolts people in like you. And I think that you'll be just fine. I went into that room, I felt like somebody drugged me because I felt so calm from that one statement. So then that was on a Saturday, right? So Monday, when I showed up to the organization, the executive director, he asked me, well, Mark, so what do you think? Are you going to come join us? You going to come join us? I said, you know what? I think, you know, y'all have a lot going on here. But I think for me, it takes too long to make a decision. So, you know, I don't think that it will work for me because you got to run it up the tree maybe with 5 different people to get a decision made. And I'm used to making a call on whatever it is. So John told me, well, Mark, if you come on board, John Walker is going to be the guy that you answer to. And so when he said John Walker was going to be the guy that I sign up to, I said, sign me up. I didn't even get to break into my compensation structure or nothing. I thought I had everything mapped out. I said, just sign me up. But John Walker was really instrumental in my life in mentoring me and showing me the ropes of how to work inside the philanthropic community. Now, I'm gonna just jump all the way 30, 25 years forward to my last mentor. This guy's name was Phil Kirk. Inside of Kansas City, he's a giant. He was a giant. You know, they have an annual award that's named after him. Inside the main public library downtown, they got Kirk Hall. They have a YMCA that's called Kirk YMCA, right? Now, Phil was a former union lawyer. Now, he was an amazing philanthropist to the city of Kansas City. There was only one other philanthropist that was larger than life than Phil. Now, Phil, he would fist pound and use different hard words when he's one-on-one with you. But out in the public, he was just as calm and meek as a sheep, right? But he always tell me, Mark, never be afraid to ask the hard questions, and always never hide behind all this text and communicate, this electronic communication. Ask the hard questions. And today, his son is my business partner. We have a company called Wise Owl Ventures, and we do community impact investing stuff. So I've had, in between Phil and John, two other mentors, but mentors are very important to have.
I appreciate that theme of like understanding, hey, here are your characteristics, here are your tools, here's what you're really good at, here's a great space that you would excel in. That's a skill that I think we sometimes miss in leadership, is like being able to put people where they would excel. That's something that is so key and integral that I really appreciate that you were sharing. Dr. Keener, anything that's coming up for you?
Well, I guess it's that first experience, sort of like a resiliency and I guess your like characteristic to kind of stick with it, right? Kind of like you said, it could have been negative, you could have stormed out, but okay, find the keep coming and you just, again, we talk a lot about you just never know who you're going to meet, and just happen to meet, you know, your mentor there at that meeting is profound, right? You still remember that, 20 years later. So
Yeah.
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 So, oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just saying, yeah, press on, never give up. That's my motto, never give up.
Yeah.
Most people say, boy, you will wear somebody out, Mark, try to get your yes. I don't know.
I had an important person in my life, and he always would say, how do we get to yes, right? When there's this disagreement, how do we get to yes? How do we, what's the mutual benefit? How do we get to yes? So, Mark, what are key characteristics of effective mentors? So mentors were important. You gave some examples, what
Now that I am a mentor, I have found I find the most key characteristic of being a good mentor is being a good listener. Because if you don't listen, how are you going to mentor anybody? How are you going to provide any guidance if you haven't listened to them to find out what's really going on, what they need? I used to think that mentoring was not a reciprocal thing. I didn't understand that dynamic, that mentoring is reciprocal, because I have to learn in order to teach. I have to learn, or in order to guide, I have to learn what's going on. So it's definitely reciprocal. That's the most key component. And then another component is leading with that direction. For example, I have some young guys and young women that I mentor now, four total, as a matter of fact. And they're all in different spaces, but all are in real estate and construction space, though. But some need other guidance. The guidance that I provide is different to each individual. And the learning modalities are different as well. But listening and leading by example, those are two key characteristics that I found are very beneficial.
First thing that comes up in my brain is like the level of humility that goes into that, like being able to say, like, it's not about me, I'm still learning, and also it's not about me, so I'm gonna change my approach, like let me meet you where you're at.
Yeah, I just like, you listen to understand versus listen to respond. So, just being open to that. And again, just, hey, it really, yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing with students and teaching students. I'd love to learn from students and build in that mutual growth. So yeah, right on. I actually, what I was thinking, that first part was our clip for the hook for the
Put it in the beginning of the
yeah.
episode, right? Yeah. There's our clip. Yeah. One thing we've been chatting a lot about on this podcast is diversity, equity, inclusion. and we understand how integral leadership goes into, creating change. So, how would you say can leaders be more effective in advocating for those values and pushing for, more change in our world?
You know what? I have to lean back on that listening part first,
Mm,
because if one doesn't listen, how are you going to even comprehend what's really going on? How are you going to even guide for change? What I've learned is listening and responding back with a comprehensive, response that I understood, and then making suggestion about change that. And I'm gonna share this with you about what I've learned about with dealing with carpenters in the construction world, or actually all master craft trade persons. I'm a general contractor. I have a Class A contractor license, had it since 1999. And that does not mean that I am skilled at highly skilled journeyman at every level. I was a ceramic tile setter. A tile setter is a journeyman. That's what I did for the introduction of my life into the construction industry. However, these trade crafts persons, they just want to do their work, right? But when you come to suggest them or tell them something, that I'm going to use it two ways. I used to think that I could tell them how I need it done.
mm,
When I got met with such resistance and how long it takes for them to embrace what I told them to do, I learned. My ex-wife was a psychologist. She said, learn to suggest. Once I embraced that, man, it's been smooth sailing all along. Learn to suggest. You know what? I think that there could be a better way. You know what? I don't know if it could be better, but here's one of the things that I would think that, why don't we try this? Why don't we just give it a try? And it works. I mean, it's worked for me. And it's worked for my mentees as well. I'm turning them to suggest, don't tell people anything. When I say, you know what, here's a conversation I might be having with someone. And I might say, well, you know what you should do? I'm like, retract that. You didn't hear that word, should. You know what I'm thinking could happen, what you could do is I revamp it, even if I say it right out of my mouth that what you should do. I don't tell nobody what they should do anymore. It's done. So
I
Yeah,
love it.
I believe that really helps with effective and leadership change.
I love that answer. I think I work with primarily teenagers right now, and I know that if I tell anybody that they should or shouldn't do something, my teenagers are gonna want to do the exact opposite
Yeah.
of what I tell them. And what I'm finding out is that adults are kind of a lot like teenagers still. So if I tell somebody, "Hey, you should do this," or "Man, you should really do this,"
Right.
there's going to be this inclination to, "Well, I'm going to do the opposite now."
That's
So
right.
I appreciate that answer a lot.
Mhm.
yeah. I often think about, I wonder, that's how I like to kind of suggest. I
Yeah.
wonder if, like, let's be on this journey together. Let's wonder what could be, like so. But
Doc, I'm
Um,
gonna use that one. I'm gonna use that. That's a
yep.
mentoring moment right there,
Yeah.
bro.
there you go. It's a freebie. Yeah, you can have that one.
Right.
I wonder if.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I throw in a curveball, an
Yeah.
unscripted
Well,
question?
I don't have to hit it, so go right ahead.
Okay, yeah, I suppose that's true. So I want to be honest with myself and kind of share that I know very little about real estate, construction, contracting, all that entire field. And so I suppose, what would you say are some common like misconceptions about your field, about that area of work? What are some yeah, common misconceptions that an everyday kind of guy like me would just assume that actually, it's a little more than that, or oh, well, it's a little off. It's more
Oh
like
man,
this.
I get that all the time. Okay, here's one on real estate because I have a broker's license, right? People figure, they get in, they see house flipping, buy a house, rehab it, flip it, rent,
Mhm.
right? Right? So they figure that they can just get a real estate license and just sell, sell, sell. And it's like, no, real estate agency licensing is not just about selling. It's about really understanding because you have a product, you have a skill set that you have to develop, you have the relationships that you have to nurture. Oh, that's a big funnel all by itself to get to close. So it's like, don't get your sales license and think you're gonna be like, Vanna White. I don't know, where you just show it and sell it and close it. And then on the construction side, everybody wants to be the boss.
Mm.
Oh my God. Don't have a clue about hardly anything in construction when it comes to what's underneath the drywall. There's framing, there's nail plates, there's all kind of things that you can damage if you just go over there and take a nail and drive into that wall. So it's like understand from ground level, work with someone, shadow,
Mm.
and that will get you more insight to learn and be open to learn and be open to the criticism too, because in the construction industry, it can be pretty rough and ready, raw, ready, rolling. I've really, in the last couple of years, really toned down my voice and probably some of the stuff that comes out of my mouth, especially since I'm mentoring now.
I appreciate those answers. Yeah, yeah, and it goes perfectly into the things that you've already shared. So I love that consistency.
Well, just because you said that, I got to share. It's a funny story because nobody got hurt, but I remember growing up, my dad was putting in. We had stairs going down in the basement, and he wanted to put in like a little shelf in the wall to put extra boots and shoes, and so he was just going to cut a hole in the wall. Well, drilling the first pilot hole, he hit an electrical wire and got a little bit of a shock,
Boom.
shall we say. And so you never know what's behind the wall. It may be like a counseling, mentoring thing, right? We never know what's on the inside, right? Our persona or outside might not be what's on the inside. So,
That's right.
Love it.
so Mark, tell us. Early on, you in our interview here, you mentioned it was an anniversary for your acquiring your disability, and now you have a sort of a new career or a new a business. So tell us a little bit about that and how you're succeeding with that.
I'm excited about it. I started markirvin.net, as you see the logo behind me, that's focused on self-advocacy for clients and patients in the healthcare industry, excuse me, and on the built environment to try and the goal is to guide contractors, developers, architects, engineers on how to remove barriers for more accessibility. Because there's a component called universal design that has 7 components inside of universal design that makes it universally adaptable to most all users who may have some form of a disability or a challenge, physical challenge or mental physical challenge. For the healthcare side, what I learned from becoming a paraplegic is that most people, they go dark. They go dark. They don't want to come out of the house. When I first started talking to some of the groups that I started networking with, people were like, well, Mark, how long you been in a wheelchair? I'm like, 6 months. They like, whoa, man, I thought you've been in a wheelchair for 2 or 3 years or 20 years, man, because your spirit, your attitude, how you are moving with that, right? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, for my first 2 to 4 years, I didn't even come out of the house. I was like, did they have you locked in or what? Were you a prisoner? They're like, man, no, it's just too many barriers. You go out into the world, the sidewalks jacked up. Your thresholds are too high to get in. Uh, Everything is barrier, barrier, barrier. And I'm like, wow, that's dark. So, and then I also learned that people have tendency, I've heard that people that have been married for 20, 30 years, one person ends up with a disability, boom, divorce court inside of a year or two.
Mm.
because somebody's attitude, both parties didn't sign up, neither party signed up for that occurrence to take place. So what also I learned is like some experiences with technology, like assistive technologies, right? That's how I ended up speaking at you all as a keynote with assistive technologies. I didn't want a power wheelchair because I found an experience when I was in rehab that I was in a power wheelchair. I found a sunny window inside the rehab center, and I reclined back, relaxed, and I woke up an hour later in the wheelchair. I woke up, I told my therapist, I never want to see this wheelchair, power wheelchair again. I don't want it. They say, why? Isn't it comfortable? I'm like, anytime you can carry a couch around with you, anytime you can take a couch and lay back and go to sleep in it, that's not going to be good at all, right?
Mm.
So they put me in a manual chair. Then when I got to the manual chair, I found out that, 62-year-old shoulders, they don't do so well pushing all day, right? So I want to have a technology on my chair. They say, Mark, you got to wait for, 2 years before you can get a smart drive. I'm like, wait, what? And then I needed a standing frame because I learned that that technology helps you with bone strengthening. Then I wanted to talk about a vehicle for being able to have mobility. They're like, 5 years out driving, right? So I'm like, what do you need? What do you need to do to get assistive technologies? So what I learned there is the doctors and the therapists told me, well, you got to have this documentation, this, and this, and this, and this. So I went to my AI friend and I said, what do we need to do to produce this kind of documentation? I produced that documentation and everybody's like, oh, yeah, okay, green stamp, green stamp, green stamp, boom, boom, boom. Kept it moving. I ended up with my technology. What I learned from there is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. As old as that adage, that saying is, it is still holds true today. If you don't speak up, you won't get it. A closed mouth won't get fed. So with assistive technologies and self-advocacy, my wife and I, we are like drum majors for self-advocacy to get what's needed so we can progress forward. So my goal with the healthcare, enhancing the healthcare professional side in this educational platform, because it's a combination of speaking platform, but it's also an educational platform. So with that, it is to inform occupational therapists and people that are, I call them frontline workers in the medical industry, on how to promote self-advocacy to their patients and their clients. Because most people, paraplegic, most of them are going to be quiet and just go for whatever the doctor says, and their life ends up cut short because they go dormant. They end up like a recluse. They just go
Mm.
dormant and they pass on. And then on this built environment side, there's so many barriers. When I first went to my accountant's office coming out of rehab, I didn't even notice he didn't have a button to push so I could get into the building. And I'm like, dude, I've been coming over here for 5 years. I didn't know you didn't have a button. He said, I didn't know we needed a button. I said, yeah, we need a button. So I have a contractor that put a button on inside of his building, in less than 2 months. Boom, he had a button now. But that's what I learned about that. So what I feel that this platform for markirvin.net is going to allow me to really get into the weeds to promote self-advocacy and for the medical side, and also help remove barriers in the built environment. That's everything built, vertical buildings or horizontal roadways and pathways. I remember when we were developing the website, they were like, do you really want to use a term like built environment? I'm like, yeah. Well, everybody doesn't know what built environment means. Well, that's okay, because when they hear about the people that read about built environment or hear it come out of my mouth, they know what it means because it is very focused to them. Architects, engineers, surveyors, anybody and everything that has to do with the design and construction industry. They all know what built environment is. So that same person asked me, they went to Google and said, what does built environment mean? Boom, it gave them a really good definition of just like what I just shared with you. So where I'm at now is I'm doing some smaller engagements for like I'm going into some schools. I'll be going into some schools to talk to kids because I'm rolling up like an OG, right? They like, what's the OG rolling up in here, to talk about? I'm here to tell you kids that look, it ain't over because you get something that is major challenging that can just change your life. Because when I fell and broke my neck, it was like night and day switch. It's like, whoa, what are you gonna do now? You're gonna get up from there out of rehab and you're gonna keep it moving. So my wheels are legs now. I have a ATV wheelchair that'll do 30-degree slopes, tilts, air inflated tires. You can't keep me away from the site. So this educational piece is and speaking piece is going to allow me to be a louder voice. Now let me back up just a little bit. In 2005, my construction company, KC Mass Services, we were the pioneers for modifying homes for people with disabilities and people aging. 2005, right? I had a botched up hip replacement. I just married Sharon 2 years prior to. And I'm like, man, I know we out of the annulment period, but she may want to send me back like damaged goods if I go, go really down on her, right? So I broke a shower handle coming out of the shower, and I was depending on that shower handle, that plate glass, thinking that it was sturdy enough. And I'm like, oh my God. So if a person like me who's an expert in the construction industry, I thought that shower handle door was reliant enough for me to lean on, and I busted it and I almost fell. What about the people that don't have a clue? So we converted our construction company to focus on modifying homes for aging and people with disabilities. So then in 2022, when I got injured, when I was on the phone talking to my lawyer, he said, Mark, I feel like Ichabod Crane here. It's like, it feels like I fell asleep and I woke up and now you're doing the same, you need the same thing that we used to do way back in the day. It's amazing how life cycle turns like that.
Well, that's what I was thinking. You're like a perfect example of bridging the like theory and practice gap, right? Like you had obviously the knowledge and experience of your design and building and then obviously when you acquire your disability, now you have, okay, this is really what it means in reality and have that now extra additional vision and ability to make sure we're again universal design and that we're living the least restrictive environment and again going back to our inclusion piece, right? We're making sure everybody has a better opportunity to be fully participate in society.
That's right. That's right.
The longer we talk, the more like kind of like fired up I'm getting. I'm like I'm starting to get like energized and I think my question for you is like what fills your bucket? Like what like clearly you got all this energy, so like I know that we can't always have this energy. So I'm just like where do you get this from?
I'll tell you, Brayton, if you ask my wife, she says he wakes up like that.
Just comes like that, yeah.
He wakes up
It
like
comes
that.
pre-installed with it, yeah.
She's like, calm down. Don't drink coffee. Now I'm sitting here drinking coffee at 5 o'clock, right? She's not home yet, right? So you don't know I got this coffee. We're gonna go to some art show this evening, right? But I wake up like this, and advocacy is what really rocks my boat. Advocacy. When I started as a real estate agent in '93 or '93, I never listed a home. I always worked on the buyer side.
Hmm.
I always wanted to help the buyer. I didn't bump the seller. I want my buyer, I want them to feel the power of somebody helping you get the best deal, the best house, the best deal. And even when it came to even in the construction side, uh, it's all about, I work as an owner's representative now. And in that space, I have some amazing clients that I work with. They're nonprofit organizations. They're doing mission-oriented work as well. Like one client, they were doing a repurposing of an old school building, and that old school building is converting it into 20 apartment units for women who are suffering from domestic abuse with their children. So we'll have 20 apartment units, 2 to 4 bedroom units, big 4 bedroom units. 4 bedroom units is kind of unheard of in the apartment sector because it's a lot of wear and tear on the unit. That's why you don't see 4 bedroom units, right? Because they get all of the kids and all of the people that can get in there, and that's a lot of wear and tear. But we're building out those 20 units, and they're going to have full wraparound service. It's on a 12-acre tract of land, so it's like a serenity place. Then another client, they're doing 46-acre development, whereas they're putting in 44-plex buildings, and they service developmentally disabled. So my job as an owner's rep is I assemble the whole development team, the architects, the engineers, everybody, the general contractor, help the organization vet those organizations. And then I'm on the owner's side. I get to beat up all the general contractors and everybody else. Make sure they do what they're supposed to do in their work. So advocacy is what really drives me.
Well, Mark, I've just really enjoyed our time together. We appreciate you taking time out for us. And now I guess we're turning the mic over to you. And what's your final like mentor moment? Do you have any tips or advice for our listeners?
A mentoring moment is always trying. I suggest that people always connect to people that can expand their sphere. That's what I suggest. If it's an old saying, but if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to go in another room because you're not gonna grow there if you're the smartest one there. And always I suggest being a good listener so one can really grab a hold. Because one of the things that I learned from the reciprocal mentoring and trying to, I call it, ease up to really high level executives and people that can really give me some more guidance and expand my sphere is if I don't follow through with what it is that they suggested to me, you may not even know that you've been edged out or dropped. That is so crucial. You won't even know it. I talk to these youngsters a lot about that. It's like, I'm going to tell you that you didn't follow through, but somebody may not tell you. You just look up and they're no longer there with you. So pay attention and follow through, or at least tell why you didn't follow through with what was suggested when you were seeking that guidance.
That's some great advice. I mean, this has been such a great episode. I see Brayton smiling, so I know when he smiles, I know it's been a good episode. So.
Well, I know I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. This was great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us, your personality, your energy. This has just been a really great conversation. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you, gentlemen.